Hello again from Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin, broadcasting from Rigel Studios here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns, related political issues, and self-defense. Fired Up is on my website, Fired Up with Bob Irwin, as well as the American Guns and Glory Network, YouTube, and numerous other media. If your local internet provider doesn't carry Fired Up, ask him to do just that, and we'll take care of it. A new show is posted every Thursday around 5 p.m. Pacific Time. The audio feed is rebroadcast for radio listeners on Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network. You can check out KELY1230.com for a station in your part of Nevada. If you have questions or comments, you can send me an email to bob@firedupmail.com. That's bob@firedupmail.com, or leave a message on my office recorder, which is 702-257-1060. If you don't leave a message, I can't call you back, so leave contact information so I can do that. This first story is from basically the National Shooting Sports Foundation. It's a trade association for the firearms industry. Updated a retail survey-based estimates and concluded that nearly 5 million Americans purchased a firearm for the very first time in 2020. NSSF surveyed firearm retailers, which report that 40% of sales were conducted to purchasers who have never previously owned a firearm. The data equates to nearly 5 million first-time gun owners in the first 7 months of 2020. This is a tectonic shift in the firearms and ammunition industry marketplace and a complete transformation of today's gun-owning community. Is a quote from Lawrence G. Keene. He's NSSF's Senior Vice President and General Counsel. He's their main lawyer. These first-time buyers represent a group of people who, until now, were agnostic regarding firearms ownership. That's rapidly changing, and these Americans are taking hold of their God-given right to keep and bear arms and protect themselves and their loved ones. NSSF surveys revealed that 58% of firearms purchases were among African American men and women, the largest increase of any demographic group. Women comprised 40% of first-time gun purchasers. Retailers noted that they are seeing a 95% increase in firearm sales and a 139% increase in ammunition sales over the same period last year in 2019. This is also an election year, and firearm sales typically rise during presidential election years. However, this year, Democratic candidates Joe Biden and U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat from California, are calling for stringent gun control measures, including forcible confiscation, banning entire classes of firearms from lawful possession, licensing schemes, and repealing the Protection of Lawful Commerce Act, which would expose the firearms industry to frivolous and harassing lawsuits. Each month since March, the NICS background checks, the federal government background checks, have set a record as the strongest month ever recorded for that particular month. Every month, record sales. Comments on this: reading any media about the Biden-Harris administration's plan for your Second Amendment rights, listeners are well aware of the coming regulations. Confiscations of military-looking rifles through a forced buyback program, outlawing any magazines that hold more than 10 cartridges, federal approval of any transfers of firearms by requiring a federal FFL dealer to broker the transaction. That means he takes the gun and then he gives it to the new party. The most chilling, of course, is the change to the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms Act, what we call the PLCAA, so sellers or transferors of firearms can be held liable for any misuse of guns that they placed in commerce, even if that gun has changed hands several times. That change could close the entire firearms industry in a matter of days, as no insurance provider would dare issue such a policy with an unimaginable risk factor. We're going to break here for a little commercial about my latest book, and I'll be back in just about a minute and a half. Don't go away. My latest book, Self-Defense with Firearms, Use of Force in Nevada, is now available on Amazon Kindle for $4.95. You can download it now. It contains examples of dozens of shootings and pointing a firearm cases that I personally experienced in my 24 years in law enforcement, or where I testified in court or deposition as a firearm and use of force expert. The book is about the use of firearms in defense of yourself and others in my home state of Nevada. I have appeared as an expert witness in Nevada courts dozens of times, and that experience has shown me the necessity of putting pen to paper once again. Nevada state law as printed can be misleading to those of you who read it, as it is written in legal jargon, what I usually call lawyer speak. These statutes are also bent or even broken by the courts in their everyday decisions that we generally call case law. Those are rulings that say this or that statute does not apply in a particular incident and similar cases. That causes the law you are depending on when you make a decision to use your firearm only partially or not apply at all to your actions. Relevant Nevada statute numbers are included here and there, so readers may look up current wording on the Nevada State website. Teaching firearms in 28 law enforcement academies, including cadets from 26 different Nevada agencies, personally instructing over 30,000 concealed firearm permit students and 20,000 private security officers, I've discovered a lot of commonalities in deadly force incidents. Less than 100 pages, this book offers advice that can save lives and costs of expensive defense lawyers to reduce your losses in the inevitable civil lawsuits that follow these incidents. Get a copy, learn how to avoid, prepare for, and react to life-threatening situations. And I'm back. Second story here, NBCChicago.com, a journalist named Chris Coffey reported December 8th, 2020 in Round Lake Beach, Illinois, an employee held at gunpoint during an armed robbery attempt in Round Lake Beach shot two suspects before they fled the scene to a waiting vehicle. That began a search for the driver and passenger who managed to escape from the responding officers. Round Lake Beach Police Department, boy, that's hard to say, reports the shooting happened around 10:45 in the evening in the 1000 block of Fairfield Road. A male and female pair of suspects ordered employees of the business behind the counter and held them at gunpoint. In a press release, police said at one point during the incident, one of the employees was able to access a firearm and shot several rounds at the suspects, apparently striking both suspects. The man and woman, the robbers, fled the store and got into a waiting vehicle, which then drove down a dead-end street. Good planning. The driver and the front passenger ran away, leaving the injured accomplices who were in the back seat behind. The vehicle was discovered by authorities, and the two who were shot were taken to Condell Hospital in Libertyville. Their conditions were not immediately known. Police searched for the driver and passenger, setting up a perimeter and bringing in canine units, but the two were not found. According to the department, an investigation remained ongoing as of early Tuesday morning. Comments here: another armed victim is able to defend himself and other employee victims by being prepared with the will and skill needed. Nationally, the crime rates are skyrocketing with armed robberies and murders. With most major Democrat-led cities suffering huge crime spikes, it is incumbent for vulnerable households to be able to defend themselves. The old saying, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, certainly applies now. The third story, the Yakima Herald Republic, a journalist named Phil Forletito, I'll call him Phil, reported December 5, 2020 in Yakima County, Washington. That's the state of Washington. Prosecuting attorney Joe Bursick is looking into a recent shooting of a fleeing burglary suspect. The 24-year-old male suspect suffered a gunshot wound to the back of his head after allegedly burglarizing a warehouse early Tuesday morning in the 12,000 block of Occidental Road in West Valley. The suspect told Yakima County Sheriff's deputies that property owners shot at him as he drove around them, but with one round striking him in the back of his head and others striking his windows and tires. Deputies found that vehicle with its windows and tire shot out and blood inside. The suspect is accused of taking 2 trucks, 2 welders, and a plasma cutter, that's not cheap, from the warehouse. Property owners reported to deputies that they had found the stolen trucks in locations on Antrim Road. The property owners discovered the truck as they pursued the suspects. It's a strange set of facts, and I'm going to look into it, Brusick said, that's the prosecutor. The prosecutor wouldn't speculate as to whether the property owners face possible charges. He said, all I can say is the investigation is ongoing. Obviously, the use of a firearm by the alleged victim in these circumstances is always a serious matter. The sheriff's office spokesman said the suspect told deputies he didn't intend to seek charges against those who shot at him. Isn't that nice? He's not going to seek charges. Anyway, the deputies arrested the suspect later that evening on unrelated warrants at a residence in the 1500 block of Aspen Springs Lane. Items taken from the warehouse were found at his residence. Prosecuting attorney Joe Brusick said use of deadly force is only justified when there's an imminent threat to someone's life. To use potentially deadly force to keep someone from stealing property or obtaining property back is always a serious matter. The Sheriff's Department spokesman said only reasonable force can be used to protect property. Reasonable force includes tactics such as holding a suspect to the ground while calling 911 or wielding a bat to warn them off. He added, human life is more important than property. Reasonable force can be used to protect property. Deadly force can be used to protect people. Defending yourself is a right, but it comes with rules, rights, and obligations. That's very true. The suspect is being held in the Yakima County Jail on suspicion of burglary and vehicle theft. His bail has been set at $45,000. That's a fair amount of money. Apparently in this case, comments on it now, the property owners chose to follow the thieves in an attempt to recover their property and perhaps capture them. It's nice of the thief to forgive the property owner for shooting him. Perhaps that's some legal play on the part of his attorney. A pursuit in order to recover property or detain a thief is valid only in Texas, as far as I know. So don't try this at home unless your home is in the Lone Star State. We're going to break for some words from our friends and associates. I'll be right back. Freestyle Martial Arts, located at Jones and Russell here in Las Vegas. You can reach them at 702-551-9009. That's 702-551-9009. CCS Gunsmithing. Chris Eifelt, the man who does all the NRA help, he's at 2216 South Rainbow Boulevard near Sahara. He can be reached at 702-365-1732. Once again, 702-365-1732. Jerry Creed, a trust attorney. If you have a firearms trust or need one, this is your guy. You can reach Jerry at 702-806-7777. That is 702-806-7777. CCW Maggie is found all over the internet. You can reach her by phone at 702-375-5900. That's 702-375-5900. All sorts of firearms training, ladies only classes. She is the best of the best. Call CCW Maggie. And we are back. Story number 4 comes from WOIO TV19, a journalist named Steph Crane, reported December 12, 2020 in Akron, Ohio. Go back to the beginning there for just a second. You get that? WOIO. WOIO is in Ohio. I just thought it was cute. A would-be robber who pulled a gun out during a robbery at an Akron Metro PCS store Tuesday night was shot by an employee who pulled out a gun of his own. The robbery happened just before 8 p.m. in the Metro PCS store at 634 Main Street in Akron. According to the Akron police, the suspect entered the store, pulled out a handgun, and took money from the cash register. The suspect then tried to get access to the safe. As the suspect was distracted with the safe, a Metro PCS employee pulled out his own handgun and fired multiple shots at the suspect. That caused the robber to quickly leave the premises. That's pretty common when you shoot at bad guys, they tend to run away. Responding officers took the suspect into custody upon arriving at the scene. The would-be robber had been hit by at least one shot and is in the hospital where he is listed in serious but stable condition. The identity of the suspect has not been released. I love reporting these incidents wherein an armed victim is able to protect himself or herself from harm by being prepared. As I have mentioned many times, it is your responsibility to defend yourself. Police are asked to do an impossible job if required to be everywhere at all times. You cannot successfully sue the cops for failing to stop random crime. They may have a duty to protect certain witnesses clearly known to be in danger, but even in those cases, if their reasonable efforts fail, cops are usually immune from civil lawsuits. What I'm saying is, folks, it's up to you to defend yourself. It really is. Story number 5. Fox16.com, a journalist named Chris Counts, reported December 8, 2020 in Jacksonville, Arkansas, that when Jacksonville Police Department officers responded to reports of a robbery near Military Road and Bailey Street Monday night, they discovered the body of a man matching the description of a robbery suspect from an earlier call. Dispatchers received that call just after 8 p.m. about an attempted robbery at a Jacksonville Stop and Shop. 2 hours later, police said the suspect attempted to rob another victim outside her home. Investigators said the suspect's third robbery attempt turned fatal when the man's intended victim shot the suspect in self-defense after the suspect shot at them. The identity of the suspect is unknown at this time, but he was described as a male between 19 and 24 years of age. He was wearing a black shirt, a black jacket, and a pair of red sweatpants, along with brown UGG boots, UGG. I'm not familiar with that, but apparently that's a famous brand of footwear, UGG boots. He's got them on with his red pants. The investigation is ongoing. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Harbour, that's Harbour, with the Jacksonville Police Department. You can reach him at area code 501-982-3191. 501-892-3191 if you have information on this case. Comments here. We're all aware that 5% of the population commits 90% of the crime. This case is a clear example of that. Most of us never commit an actual crime, at least on purpose. Story here, back when I was a court cop, a bailiff, we had maybe a dozen people who were constantly in Boulder City Court or Boulder Township Justice Court for traffic tickets or bad checks or barking dogs or shoplifting or domestic fights or neighbor disputes or evictions for non-payment of rent. The judge promised to use the statute that can declare 10 misdemeanors to be a felony, which gives them a year or two in prison. That threat from a statement from the judge, usually caused whatever perp was to move out of town. In this Jacksonville incident, we have apparently the same type of criminal, but starting on a felony level. Sooner or later, these guys run into an armed citizen, armed victim, who defends themselves rather than submitting to or running from the crime. It's always a tough decision for the intended victim. Using shots at somebody causes a lot of problems mentally, physically, and legally, but sometimes they've just had enough. Story number 6. KOCO ABC News 5, a journalist named Patrina Agger, A-D-G-E-R, reports December 8, 2020 in Edmond, Oklahoma, a local woman was on the couch with her young sons when their front door swung open and a male subject walked in. She said, "My sons were sitting there watching cartoons. Maybe it was Grandpa. My youngest son, a 3-year-old, ran to the door." The male subject was later identified as a 28-year-old who the family had never seen before. The woman said, "Who are you?" He stood and looked at me, and I yelled like bloody murder, yelled. Her husband heard her cries from the other room. The husband said, "So I ran to the closet, grabbed a gun, and I had him at gunpoint. He'd immediately dropped to the floor, laid down. Then he jumps back and walks toward me, screaming, 'Shoot me, shoot me.' I could tell something was wrong with him. No kidding. The woman tried to escape with her children, aged 3 and 6, opened a window and knocked out the screen. The couple told KOCO5 that the intruder made sexual comments about the two boys while they waited for police to arrive. The police took the intruder into custody. The couple later learned that he lives a block away from their home. The husband said, "I don't think it was premeditated. He didn't mean any harm. Glad it went the way it did. My wife and I are just glad I was home." Comments here. This is a truly scary incident. The mental case just walks into the home. Fortunately, he responded to the husband's order to lay down on the floor. The explanation of all the players' actions is not clear in the reports or the video interviews. It says various points. He got on the floor, then he jumped up, and so on and so on. All seems well that ends well. It seems wise even in a quiet rural area to keep your doors locked, you think? Last one. This is 7 stories for today. KMOV.com reports in December 10, 2020, a couple days ago, in Maplewood, Missouri, the Maplewood Police Department says a young man entered the Boost Mobile store at 7222 Manchester Road after 6 p.m. with a gun and said he was going to rob the store. During the robbery, an employee pulled out their own gun and shot the suspect. The robber was later identified as a local 21-year-old. He was hospitalized and will need to undergo multiple surgeries. According to the police, the subject was wearing an ankle monitor at the time, having been charged with a previous robbery and released pending trial. He wore his ankle monitor to the robbery. The clerk was brought to the Maplewood Police Department to be interviewed, but at this time it is not expected he will face any charges, as officers believe he was acting in self-defense. Comments here, another career criminal who keeps going until stopped by an armed victim. Clearly he should not have been released after his last case, but I understand it is difficult for a judge to make that decision. Time usually does not allow a deep investigation of the accused criminal's likelihood of reoffending. In high crime areas, sometimes jails are full, probation officers short-staffed, and so forth. I don't expect in this case the perp will be released again. Occasionally in the past, local jails here in Las Vegas were so full that judges were told don't jail anybody because the jail would be required to release someone else due to a federal consent decree on overcrowding. With law enforcement budget cuts, the same may be happening in this instance. However, as I said, I don't expect him to be released again. You can check out my recent shows at firedupwithboberwin.com. It contains several dozen episodes. Please patronize our friends and supporters. My logo merchandise, hats, shirts, and books are available at Battlefield Vegas, just behind Circus Circus on the Las Vegas Strip. If you are ever in Las Vegas, Battlefield is a must-see attraction. You can shoot a minigun or any of hundreds of firearms and even crush a car with an Abrams tank at their associated outdoor facility. Transportation there is provided. You can contact them at info@battlefieldvegas.com. Thank you for watching Fired Up. I'll be back next week. Watch the rest of this show on your video for our newfangled directive on what we're not responsible for and how the show works. I thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week.